Okay, we're trying to move into what most people think of as directing. I make that comment a number of times now, what people conventionally do, or what most of the time you see, or a lot of the things that we've talked about you won't see other people do. The point of that isn't that I'm so brilliant that I'm the only one who knows to do it. The point is that most people have been shown how to direct from a conventional point of view. That's mechanical usually. It deals a lot with stage composition and rhythm and other elements of movement and focus and things like that, that then they try to tell you essentially mechanical things to do to achieve that. And my whole directing perspective was obviously influenced by studying acting with Lee. Not so much, as I mentioned before, studying directing with Lee, the one term that he taught it, but more by studying acting with Lee, about how to bring these things to fruition organically rather than mechanically. So that's what I'm talking about when I say conventionally, or most of the time you won't see anybody doing these things. When they come to their second rehearsal, they're already doing what I'm talking about doing in the fifth phase of the things we've been talking about. And that's now you're working short segments of scenes. Now, last time we mentioned what one does when working those scenes as the primary thing, and that is what?
We're working the behavior so that the situation is there.
Right.
Yeah, so that the situation is alive, organic, real, truthful. So that given circumstance.
Right. Now, by working it, can you think of anybody in the arts who holds a particular position in the arts which is the closest to what a director does on stage?
How about a conductor?
Yeah, that's exactly it. And when they meet to play Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, for instance, a guest conductor comes to the Philharmonic. He's not concerned with teaching people how to play the violin. He's not concerned with what does this piece mean. He's concerned with, at each moment, what are we doing with the music to capture the essence of the material at hand. Now, if they start playing, he doesn't stop and correct them about their fingering if they're a violinist. If the person can't finger, he just talks to the Philharmonic administrative staff and says, you have to give me somebody who can play violin here. I've seen various people on television shows about the orchestra or about music. Nobody ever talks about playing the right notes. It's assumed that everybody will play the right notes. But what it is that he wants a certain emphasis, a certain timbre, a certain push, or a certain laxity in various movements, if you will. And they do not say, okay, we'll start at the beginning and play the whole piece tonight. They work the first, I've seen them, no, let's go back 8 bars to such and such, and they'll play that. No, you're not getting it, only little short pieces. And although in music, what I've seen people do is they're a little bit like movie directors. It's very short pieces that they work on sometime. Nonetheless, they're doing what the director is doing now at the 5th level. They're starting to work the piece to get the elements.
Right, and the essence, yes.
Right, yeah. The essence of what this is. And from there to the end of the rehearsal period, everything that you do is to make sure that that is, first of all, captured, the essence of what this moment is. and never lost, although other things are additionally added. Okay, so in this first rehearsal, what would you do? What would you work on? And what would you feel like had to be worked? What is it that you have to work now that we're going to the fifth phase?
Right.
We're working scenes. What is it you're working? What does working mean? What are you doing?
Well, one thing that I've always looked at it as crafting moments, because a scene is made up of moments. So you work the scene, you work the moment. So it's a little similar to what you were saying with the conductors taking a segment of and saying, no, you're not getting that right, and going back over that segment, taking a little segment and working, working a section, whether it's broken into beats or whatever, but making sure that the moment is there, that it's not just lines, but that it's alive with behavior, and that the essence of the moment is there.
Okay, so obviously that means you have to have known from the very beginning what all the moments were, which
That's
is what
right.
we talked about so much in
Yeah.
this process. Okay, so what lets you, you said before that you want to get the moments and so forth, and what lets you know that you're getting it or not?
If the essence is being communicated out.
How do you know that's...
If you're sitting there as a spectator and you see, yes, that's the essence is being communicated by the actions of the actor, the behavior of the actor, it's coming across, it's clear, then that would be evidence that they're getting it and that it's alive. They don't just understand it, but that it's being
but
expressed.
how do you know that that's what's happening? You're watching now a rehearsal where you're starting to, quote, work the scene,
Yeah.
unquote.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, how do you know? And you said, well, you try to obtain that objective or retain that objectiveness of the audience of the first time and all of that business.
Mm-hmm.
But what does it mean when you're doing it, and what does it mean when you're not? In other words, that's one thing that is theater speak. In other words, everybody will say, oh, yeah, everybody would agree with that 1,000 times because it sounds right.
Would agree with what?
With the sense, when you watch it, you're supposed to retain the objective nature that an audience has when they're coming to see that.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody would say the director should be able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But what does that mean? In other words, that concept floats up here without any pragmatic action beneath it. And everybody says, oh, yes. It's like saying everybody should come on and speak their lines spontaneously. Well, of course. Oh, yes. What do we want?
The illusion of the first time.
Yeah, exactly. Everybody wants that. Nobody says, oh, no, it should look like a stale rehearsal.
Yeah, right.
So everybody will agree to that,
Mm-hmm.
but they don't know what to do about it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I'm saying. What do you do about it?
Right.
What thermometer do you use to judge it? Or what monitor of what kind do you use to judge whether it's working?
Well, for one thing, you know that if the actors are in a pattern, it's not alive.
Well, this is the very first time you're really working it, so they're not going to be in a pattern much.
Right. And you won't have built
And
up. And you won't
especially-
have built up private jokes.
Right.
Yeah.
Especially if you do the things that we are
Yeah.
trying to suggest to do in the first four
Right.
phases of the rehearsal period. You should not be in any kind of a thing that would have ever set up a pattern for them yet.
Mm-hmm.
That usually comes from repetition. Somebody does it tonight and they try to do tomorrow night what they
Right.
did last night. And they do
But
it
sometimes
the next night.
even in the first rehearsal, you could tell that an actor has already worked out his or her part in his head and comes in
That's
and, they're
true,
already
that's true,
acting out
but
this.
all the things that we've done up to this point are trying to make sure that that doesn't happen. And we deal with them in those other phases to make sure that that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
If you don't do those other phases, then somebody's going to come in and ready all to play. I don't need rehearsal. I'm ready to play Hamlet now.
Mm-hmm.
They've learned all their lines even, or not more than that. They've learned already or memorized already how they're going to say them, which is the worst thing
That's
possible.
the worst thing.
So what part of you lets you know that it's either working or it's not working?
I'm, other than your own intuition, your own know-how, your subconscious,
Yes, that's what I'm after.
Okay.
In other words, when that's happening, It's how does it make you feel? It's not what do you think about it. What do you think about it has to do with your conceptions. The director who gets into that problem now, everybody is laughing, has conceived of a certain thing that should be played by, and is not responding. He's not feeling. He's only, yes, he took a long time, but he's getting my conception of it now. So he is intellectually self-congratulatory and congratulatory for the actor. That finally we're getting my conception of it. Well, your conception of it is worthless unless your conception of it is what you feel when you're watching it. So when you watch it, it is how does what they are doing make me feel? It is not how does what they are doing make me think, or what does it make me think about. It's what does it make me feel. Do I feel it? Because that's what happens to an audience. That's the objective reality of the audience. Their feelings are their objective reality. It moves them in some way. Now, I don't mean that these are highly emotional moments. I mean they're behavioral receptors which lie in the psyche, not in the intellect, are what are picking up whatever happens. So their interest in it is enlivened by those psychological receptors, behavioral receptors. And that's how you watch something. When they're working something, it's not moving you by that, enlivening you to the situation inside. Then they're not getting it. That's when you know they're not getting it. Now, you can see the same piece of material 100 times. Act 1, Scene 1, the first 2 people on stage. By the end of Scene 1, there are 9 people on stage. So obviously it's segmented, that Scene 1. First 2 people on the stage, all you work. You work that 100 times. If it still moves you, it's still working. And it will move you, and by move you, I mean it will excite the behavioral receptors within you if they're doing what they're supposed to do. Because it is not knowing, for instance, in the 1812 Overture, that in a little while the cannons are going to go off. That excites me. It's the listening to the juxtaposition of the pastoral elements and the military elements and being moved, even though I know exactly what's going to happen. I know what's going to happen. But what moves me is that this part of the sound pulls me in. And then I hear the little bit of the military, like off in the distance, small, but it's an excitation towards non-pastoral behavior. So that makes me feel, are we going somewhere else? And then that stops, and we're back in the pastoral. So I feel again, okay. Yeah, this is nice.
Can breathe
this is
again.
Pleasant, yeah. And then somebody's knocking at the door again. Is somebody going to come, or are they not? And then that leads to the whole thing at the end where the cannons are firing and everything else, because you've been taken emotionally here, there, and yon. And when I talk about these things, what you feel about it, obviously I don't mean that the director is moved. Oh, he's crying now. It's that you can feel through the behavioral receptors, not through the intellect. You can feel that thing is functioning the way it should function. All right. So this whole 5th level phase, if you will, of rehearsals is working each of the scenes so that every one of them excites your psyche when you watch it.
Now, if it doesn't excite the psyche, it might, let's say, your conscious mind might say, okay, that's there, but it's not exciting. Then it might be there mechanically, right?
Well, this is what happens a lot of times. And for instance, I've seen people I've worked with as directors.
Meaning they're directors themselves? Or?
They were directors, and that I either worked with them in a class or that I knew them and went to see something they directed. People have asked me to come and watch the rehearsals and so forth like that. And so I've done that before. And when I go to see that kind of excitation of what's happening, I can feel whether it's either happening or not. Because I can go just as an audience. I don't go from this perspective. Now, I know our town, so I'm going to see if doing it the way that I think it should be done. It's not what I do. I go and I sit and I look and I say, okay, yeah, I heard what they said, so? Or am I just sitting here on my seat and listening?
So
Now-
you're listening to those receptors, those
Yeah.
behavior.
Right.
What did you call them? Behavioral? No.
Yeah, it's psychic or behavioral. In other words, it's not your intellect and your conceptions of the play. Because when you go see someone and everybody seems very self-satisfied and yet nothing is happening, it's because they have been dead to their behavioral receptors and they're alive very much to their mental conception. And in seeing people who I've worked with and go to see, I quite often see that they have a conception, right? Obviously, it's luck if the actors fall exactly into that. So they work them in certain ways to try to fulfill that conception. And it never gets fully fulfilled, but they get closer and closer and closer. And so now the director sees 80% or 90% even of his conception. And he thinks the moment is working. Because this is what I thought should happen, and now it's happening. Nothing is happening within him. He's the director. I already know the play. It's not going to happen with me and all of that business. But that's not what the director should listen to. Because if his conception is met through a dead process, the audience is going to sit there and say, all right, yeah, okay, so everybody in the town is genial. Good for them. Why am I here? What am I supposed to be going through? What am I supposed to be seeing? Because nothing is happening. They're just talking to each other. Nobody's moving anybody else to a different position. Don't forget that the thing which is dramatic is that my character does something which changes your character's life. I come in and I'm in a hurry to go to the store. I have to pick something up before it closes. And you do something that makes me not do that. That's a dramatic moment. It's forces working on each other and changing the behavior.
Cause and effect?
But through cause and effect. That's what makes something dramatic. Guns, yelling, chase. The thing in a chase scene in the movies often is, it's not dramatic at all. It's just a lot of action. Because you know the guy's not going to die. He's the action hero of the thing. So it doesn't matter how many times the car gets wrecked and he crawls out. Any other person would be dead. But the action hero is going to jump off of the bridge where he had a 9-car wreck with all of them hitting a bus. And he's all upturned down. And the bridge is 100 feet down to the water. And a boat is going under the bridge with the person he's trying to catch up to. And he just jumps off the bridge and lands on the top of the boat and jumps around and comes up with a bloody mouth and kills everybody on the boat. Like in Taken, when he jumps down on the yacht and runs around killing everybody on the boat. It's impossible. Those aren't dramatic moments. Because nothing really does anything to affect his behavior. They hit him in the mouth, they tie him up. It would be a very interesting and surprising action movie where in Taken, where he almost gets to his daughter and then somebody blows his head off. And then you say,
Be a hell of an ending.
That would be dramatic. Because somebody would affect what you're expecting of his behavior.
Mm-hmm.
So now, when you're watching something, when people start to do things that affects the other person's behavior, you will feel it. You'll feel the rhythmic change. Because the other one wasn't going in the direction. The first person was going to the store. And yet the person adjusted their behavior and now they're not. At any rate, so this is what you mean by working the scenes. You work it, you let them do it, and you watch to see that it moves you. You watch to see that you feel it, not that they fulfill your conception of it.
And the it that you're looking to feel, how could we define that? What is the it?
Well, in the opening to our town, what would I watch? I would watch to see if this guy pulls me in. if I'm interested in him, if I'm watching what he does, if I want to hear what he says next, rather than, okay, the guy's going to talk to me a while, and whatever he says, and it's information, and I don't give a
Right.
fuck about the information because I don't care whether it's such and such degrees and such latitude or not. It has nothing to do with, I didn't come here for longitude and latitude. Well, anyway, so when you work this, how would you work it? You work Act 1, Scene 1, or the first segment, whatever it is. But you work the first segment of the play, then what do you do?
Might try to run it again, work it again.
No, I don't mean in that same night's rehearsal. I mean in the following rehearsal.
Oh, in the following rehearsal.
Yeah, that night, you're going to work it and
Yeah.
get it. And since the night is going to be like 4 hours rehearsal time,
Right.
and you're not going to spend 4 hours on this
One
little
scene, yeah.
segment.
So you're going to get to several segments, yeah.
Right. And you try to do this.
How about the next night you run, you start, or you work those segments again, or you run them before you move on to something else?
It depends on whether that's necessary. Now, I would do that in that first night. In other words, I wouldn't let them go if they're missing the basic thing in the first night and go on to something else. If I couldn't get the first thing out of them in the first segment, why would I take them into the second segment? Because if you take medication, you have to take pill A first, wait an hour, take pill B, wait 2 hours and take pill C, and you don't take the first one. Taking the second and third ones, no, you will not get what you're supposed to get out of that program of medication. So there's no sense going on to other things where that same person now is really supposed to be full of the thing that they have gotten in the first part before they can go on to the next thing. Mm-hmm. So I wouldn't run something in the second day of this fifth phase that I'd run the night before just to run it. What I would do, and I think should be done, obviously, or I wouldn't say this, is that I would go through the whole play so that everybody has a chance now to build on what they've done up to that point. Now, that whole play may take 3 nights.
So, in other words, you're saying that if you got through on the first night, you got through, let's say, 10 segments in a row, you would start the next night with the 11th segment.
Sure. And of course, again, part of your knowing what the play is from top to bottom before you even hold rehearsals is you have to be aware of the dramatic movements of the play. In other words, which are segments and which are not segments. That psychologically in the first scene, something gets laid down when there are only 2 people there, which is different now when somebody else comes in. That would be a new segment, if you will.
Yeah.
And so your awareness of the play structurally must be something that's achieved in your initial work with the play.
Right.
You don't come now to rehearsal and go through the 4 phases, now get to phase 5 and say, gee, how do I cut this up? How do I cut this up to segments so that obviously I'm not going to run the whole play every night. So how am I going to work it?
Yeah.
No, you have to know from the beginning where those segments are. And when you know that from the beginning, now when you get to the 5th point, you know this one I do first, the next one I do second, the next one I do third. There is no benefit in working the actors in this manner. I work them today. I work them the same thing again tomorrow. Now, come back in a week because I'm going to be doing that with the rest of the play. What are they going to be doing for the week? They're going to be going downhill. They're going to either be losing what you want or they're going to be adding all kind of shit on their own that you don't want.
You mean like if you took off for several days?
No. You're now working the second act, and so they're only in the first act. So you go away for a week, and I'll get back. Don't do that. Oh, we haven't talked a little bit about...
What would you do in place of that?
I work them the first act, right? I work all the way through that play, but in those 3 days. Mm-hmm. So if they miss anything, they're only in the first act, then they're back already after only having missed 2 days. They're not you're spending a whole lot of time on other things, and we'll get back to you later. They've only missed 2 days, and even then, as I said before, I wouldn't demand it ever, but I always encourage people, if you want to come watch rehearsal the other times, do. It'll help you in ways that you don't understand. So sometimes people do that because they're committed and they're all, they want to be as good as they can. And when they believe in you as a director, people tend to do things that they see in their mind, or that they believe at least in their mind, are going to help them.
So if you're working a segment, let's say Our Town, for instance, you probably are having the stage manager come work him first.
Sure.
The opening of the play.
Right.
And then as you're working the sections, let's say he's not getting certain things. Are you going back to the beginning of the play with him and working him again?
No, I'm stopping him.
You're stopping him.
Yeah. When he starts and he gets to something, I'm saying, whoa, wait a minute.
As you're working the segment, and let's say an actor isn't quite catching on, it's clear that the essence isn't there. It's not, because even now you're already looking for whether it's touching your psyche in a sense, right? Your subconscious.
Yeah, is it pulling you in or
pulling
not?
you in? And let's say it's not that, it's the moment isn't quite right or whatever. You said you don't go back necessarily to a whole nother. You just stop there and talk about it, right?
When it gets to a point where I see that if they go further, they're only going to be further away from the reality.
Right.
Because I know what the scene is, I know what has to happen in the scene.
Yeah.
I know that in a moment they have to respond in some way in relation to the reality that they don't even have.
And it's a domino effect, so if you remove the dominoes.
Right. It's not going to fall.
Yeah.
So I stop them before they get to the place that they can't possibly play now. Another thing that you have to realize about the actor's ego and all of that business is you don't want to challenge their egos unnecessarily by saying you got to do it now. Just like the way I'm not going to make somebody eat crow because I've shown them they're wrong, and now if they do it, they'll have to be showing the rest of the cast, I knuckled under. So
right.
I don't make them do that. They don't play it. And by tomorrow night or the next time we're going through it, nobody will remember that anyway. Nobody will sit around for the rest of the thing saying, oh, now is he going to knuckle under? Unless you made a whole big thing out of it. And you're going to determine to make him knuckle under and he's determined not to. Then the biggest thing in the next rehearsal where that moment's played is everybody's going to even come to watch, is he going to knuckle under or not? It's all bullshit. You don't want any of that. So you don't challenge them in any way that's negative like that. You don't demand of them. Don't put them in positions. Now that's equally true when there's a difficult moment to play. They should not be challenged. They've got to do it. Because when they don't do it, what are they going to do? In other words, they're not equipped to do it now. They're going to then do phony things to try to
do it. Yeah.
And then that's the worst thing they could possibly do.
Right.
So I wasn't trying to suggest you go through it and you stop them and they don't do it, then you say, well, too bad for the night. I do it a few times, but just that little segment. And then...
So you might say, okay, let's take it back to where you come through
exactly.
the door.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would imagine in this, your own experience of directing, you know pretty much what you should do. Mm-hmm. Just take it back a little bit, let's try it again, and so forth. And try to remember what we talked about, when we were doing, that this line is not to say these things. This line has to mean the things that are happening underneath that then get said with these words. Mm-hmm. Now, this is another thing that I would do. Say you run it 3 times, they're still not getting there. Then I'm going to say, okay, look, we're not going to beat this to death tonight because we're not opening tomorrow, so don't worry. But this time when you come through, I don't want you to say the line at all. Don't say the line. But tell him what you want to tell him in your own words. And so, you would go on with the scene. And from that, what they say in their own words, I'll see if they don't understand the moment. Because if they don't understand it, they won't be able to put it in their own words. What they'll try to do is paraphrase the line with synonyms.
Ah,
You know what I mean?
yeah.
But if they do know it, they'll say it in their own words, and they just haven't gotten that meaning into the line yet. So you don't care about the line for tonight. So if they get it, then you just go on from there. And then the next time they get to that point, they will have thought about it, so forth. It will percolate in them, and the line will probably come out right.
But you won't run this again the next night, right? Because you're
The
gonna
next
move,
time through, if I said the next night, I meant the next time through.
that you get through that,
Right.
yeah. Because you're going to move through each segment to the end of the play, then come back,
Yeah.
right?
Now, I don't want anybody in the play to get out of line. By out of line, I don't mean doing the wrong thing. I mean to get out of the line that's going forward. I don't want them now to go into the drugstore. I've seen in town, in Manhattan, where they take children from like early elementary school to the movies. And you'll see them walking down the street, and, you know, the kids are first grade or something, and there's one piece of rope that goes down the middle, and then each has their own small leash going off of that. So they can move a little bit in their own, but it's not 20 kids, I got 20 leashes. They're going to be going all over. There's one central thing, and they're all hooked to that central thing. And so that's why I don't want anybody away from the rehearsal period for any extended period of time. I want that rehearsal period to be that middle line, and they may be away for 2 days or something like that. Mm-hmm. And it's for that reason I don't spend, 3 or 4 or 5 nights working on the first little segment.
Right. You'll move on. That's why you're saying, I won't run this the next night now. I've worked it today. Right. I got to move on to the next segment.
Also, you have to let them digest.
Yeah, okay.
Because if they were all highly well-trained people who were equivalent to the New York Philharmonic, they could do it the next day, probably. But that's not how actors are. Actors are still, most of the time, intuitive. And all the work, by the way, that you do in those first 4 segments is to encourage their intuition to come along. Even having them do all of those things, and certainly what the lines mean dramatically, that whole exercise that you do, is not so that their intellect will know what to do. It's so that their intuition, which already knows it from having read the play themselves, but they don't realize they've known it, has a way to reach up to the intellect and get the thing done. The intellect is only an appreciation of the reality. It's not, now I understand it and can do it. It's, oh yeah, I appreciate it now. Now I see why it's like that. So you want to keep them in a rehearsal period, all only a little tether away from the central line. And that you can't do when you're going to work something for a week. What we're really talking about now, if you're lucky in a 3-act play, you'll have 6 weeks of rehearsal. Sometimes it'll be 4. A lot of times things are done in 4. 4 is not really enough time for the 3 sisters or things like that. But you'll have, say, 6 weeks. What we're talking about now in the first 5 segments is probably 2 weeks or most 2.5 weeks. Because you're going to want one first reading, it's one night. To read through the whole play line by line is 3 rehearsals, maybe 4, depending upon the difficulty of the people and so forth. But usually 3 rehearsals you can get through pretty much. Then for the 3rd segment, maybe 2 days. The 4th segment, you're going to work the whole play, maybe another 3 or 4 days. Now the 5th, where you're starting to work it, is maybe 3, 4, 5 days, whatever it takes to get through the thing. So now you've worked 2.5 weeks, essentially. And that means in a good rehearsal period, you'll still have 3.5 weeks. So that this 5th phase is really working the play, letting them see what to do. Another benefit of not doing it again tomorrow night is over this period of time, from the very first read-through, ideas will come up that'll be percolating in the actor. And you give them a chance to percolate a little bit. And that's another reason why you don't explain something to them and say, okay, now do it. You don't want to challenge them, But you also want to give a chance that their intuition, their subconscious, will work on that. When they go to sleep at night, it'll work on it. When they're walking down the street, it'll work on it. They're not even thinking about the play. They're thinking about, I better hurry up to that bus because I don't want to be late to go to my whatever it is. But then they run and sit on the bus, and their mind is working on that other thing. Because as long as they're on that central tie, which is the rehearsal period, and only a little tether to each actor going off of that, so that they're really still connected always to the whole rehearsal period, you have created a life, a realm in which they will live for a particular period of time. Another benefit, by the way, of a rehearsal period where you keep everybody close to the rehearsal period, not a week away from it and so forth, is that most actors are narcissists not because they're people of low character, so they want everything for themselves. What happens in a narcissist is that his narcissistic needs that every baby has haven't been met. Usually that's faulty family. People who come to study, half the time, they don't want to learn how to act. They want to have a family who appreciates them, and they want to be in that family. When people get in a play, they feel like, oh, I'm alone. I'm running around to these auditions. I go and I sit, and there's all these other people, and I'm Jesus Christ. And when they get into something, now they feel a little bit in a family for the rehearsal period and the show. And in that, it's always a family dynamic that works. And people, some people like each other in family and not so crazy about the others. And that's always the same in a production. But they're all in the production. And even the guy you don't like is in the production. And you don't want him to do the wrong things. You want him to do the right things. If somebody is fucking up the production, everybody doesn't like that. Just like if you have an obnoxious person come in a family to the Thanksgiving dinner, and no matter what everybody else says, he says, oh, you're full of shit. You don't like that guy to be there. So the whole sense of actors being who they are, and the reason they are narcissistic, is help to be fulfilled, or not that narcissism is encouraged, but rather an antidote for their narcissism comes down in the fact that they feel that this is a family-type arrangement, the rehearsal process. And if they're always connected to it only by a short tether, never a long tether, then they're always in the family. They're always there. They're always part of it. Somebody says, what are you doing? They'll say, I'm in such and such. How's it going? Well, we're doing it. They won't say, I'm doing good, everybody else is shit. They might say, I don't like the director. They might say a lot of other things. But that's a person who hadn't felt like they've kept to that tether. If everybody is kept in, they'll feel family. They'll feel good about it.
In a sense of teamwork, yeah.
Yeah. And without saying, oh, it's got to be one for all or all for one or any of that kind of stuff. There's no I in team or any of that kind of stuff people say. That is trying to deal with the problem of non-teamwork through the symptom. Oh, you got to understand, there's no I in team. That's a symptomatology treatment. If you understand this, maybe you'll... No. You deal with the real thing, keeping everybody part of the family while you're working, and keeping them close and involved and so forth.